Hi everybody, Crista Cowan here with another episode of The Barefoot Genealogist. I missed you last week, but I had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. and to be at the National Archives for their genealogy fair, where I got to meet several of you, and that's always exciting for me to be able to put names to faces that I see on Facebook and on chat, and to be able to meet you in person and to hear about your successes in genealogy research and some of the challenges that you face. So thank you for those of you who came to that event. For those of you who aren't aware, our next major genealogy conference is going to be in Cincinnati in just a couple of weeks. It's the National Genealogical Society's annual conference. You do not have to be a member of NGS to attend that conference. So if you just Google NGS Genealogy Conference, you can get details about that if you are still interested in attending and available. And of course, I'll be there that whole week, and as always, would love to meet you. Today, we are talking about international records on Ancestry.com. One of the questions that I get a lot is, what records does Ancestry have for fill in the blank country? And I've heard, I think, all of them. And I get asked that question in email, I get asked that question in person and on chat. And so today I'm just going to share with you how you can discover what records we have online for whatever country it is that you're interested in, how you can do that on your own. And the other thing that I just want to mention is that oftentimes we have lots of records for some countries and not a lot of records for other countries. And all of that is dependent on a couple of things. The first one, of course, is there a market for those records? We are a public company, and so that makes a difference in our decision-making process. But an even bigger deal probably is the fact that not all governments have the ability to give us their records. I can think of a couple of examples off the top of my head where there are actually privacy laws and restrictions in certain countries. The biggest example that comes to mind is in England. They actually have a 100-year privacy restriction on the census. And so where the United States just released the 1940 census, because our privacy laws here in this country dictate 72 years, those censuses are not available for England because of their 100-year privacy law. So that's one of the reasons why we may not have the records that you're specifically interested in, is because of laws in the country that prohibit access to that. The second reason is just not all countries have the facilities or the capabilities or the infrastructure to provide us with the records. So for example, here in the United States Federal Census held by the National Archives. In some countries, there is no national census. There may have been a lot of local or regional censuses, but those aren't all rolled up into one national archives necessarily. And so as a company, we have to go local archive by local archive, and every one of those interactions requires negotiations and contracts and other processes to get access to those records. And then if those records haven't been microfilmed, we're actually having to go in with cameras and digitize from original documents, which of course is a process that takes a lot of time and effort and money. So it's a lot more difficult than just purchasing some reels of microfilm and running them through a microfilm scanner. So those are just some of the challenges that face us as a company as we go out and try to acquire and digitize international records. With all that said, however, we do have a lot of international records online, and so I'm just going to spend a few minutes today sharing with you how you can find out what records we have, where those records are, and then of course how to search them a little bit better. Let's dive in. It's just three simple things that you can do to find out about international records. And most people want to know because they want to know if they should upgrade to a World Explorer subscription, or they want to know what their subscription, what value their subscription has for them. If you're not certain what kind of a subscription you have, you can find that out by just clicking on this subscription details up here. You just hover over account and then click on subscription details, and that will show you whether you have a US subscription or a World Explorer subscription. It will also list for you what time-based, if it's monthly or every 6 months, or in this case, I have a World Explorer membership it's annual, and we even share with you when this particular subscription started and when it expires, so that you know when you're going to be billed again for that next set of that next year or that next month or whatever. So again, you find that subscription account information under account, and just click on subscription details to find out what kind of a subscription you have, both in records and in time. Okay. The first way to find out what international records are available are what we call our place pages. These place pages are located under search, and I'll walk through the steps here in just a minute so that you know exactly how to find them. But you're going to click on search, all records. You're going to scroll past that search box, which sometimes we get stuck at because we're so excited to fill in those empty boxes. And then just figure out which country you're interested in to see what records are available. So here's how that works. When you hover over search all records is the top option. When you get to that page, of course, here's your pretty search box. Scroll past that. Keep going, keep going, keep going. You're going to see this map here that states that you can explore by location. Now, if you're a U.S. subscriber, which I believe most of you are, it's going to default to this U.S. map. But you can see there are tabs here for other places in the world. We've got the UK and Ireland, Europe, Canada, and then Australia and New Zealand. And so you can click on the region of the world that you're interested in, and then when you get to that, you can actually then click on the specific country that you're interested in. So if I'm interested in learning about what records Ancestry.com has for Italy, I would just click on Italy there on the map, and it would take me to what we call our place pages. So this is the place page for Italy, and what it does is it lists all the records that we have specific to Italy. Now, we list them by category. So you can see here we have Italy birth, marriage, and death, or Italy military, immigration and travel. And we can only show a few in each section. So the very bottom link in each section is going to take you to a full list. In this case, it's a full list of Italian birth, marriage, and death records. And then you can look at that full list, and in this case, it's mostly broken out by region or by town where we obtained those records. It gives you a record count of how many records there are in that collection, so you get an idea of the scope or the size of that collection. And then I don't know if you can see this, you might need to make your screen a little bigger, but in tiny faint letters right after the name of the collection, we tell you what language that collection is in. Now, I hope this doesn't offend anybody, but I have been asked this question, and I try really hard not to laugh when I'm asked this question. People have found these collections, they get excited because it's the right town and it's the right time period, and then they click on them and they realize that they're in Italian. And we tell you that right up front, and then they get all angry with us because we haven't translated these records for them. That is not something that we do. These records are in the original languages, and some of these records are gorgeous, gorgeous records. I can look here, I can browse them or I can search them, but if, for example, I knew the exact town in Italy where my family was from, I could come in here and I could browse directly to the records that I was interested in, and for whichever year I was interested in those records. And then I could go, just like we've been doing with the 1940 census, I could go image by image. There's 37 images that are allegatis from this location in 1914, and I could go image by image through these to see if they have the records that I'm looking for. Or these records, most of them are indexed, and so I can search them just the same way I would search anything else. But recognize that when you put in names or when you put in locations, that they're going to be spelled probably in the traditional, in this case, Italian way. Now, one of the things that I do a lot when I use foreign language records is I will use Google Translate. So you can still do genealogy research in foreign language records, even if you don't speak the language, if you just know a few key words. And so I'll say, I want to translate from English into, German or Italian or whatever the language is, and then I will just start making a list of words that might show up on a genealogy record. words like birth and marriage and death, words like married, words like spouse, relationship words, all of those. I will just start typing a list of words so that I come up here with a list of, probably rough translations of what those words are. And then I will just copy and paste this list, print it out on a little piece of paper, and just tack it on the side of my computer screen so that as I'm researching in those records, as I come across some of those words, I know what they mean, okay? So that's, you just go to translate.google.com. It's a free service, and that's what I use quite a bit to do research in foreign language records. But remember, these records are in foreign languages. The other thing that I want to point out, and I point this out with all databases, but it holds particularly true with foreign language and international databases. When you find the database that you are interested in, before you start searching, I would highly recommend that you scroll down past that search box and you read the source information that tells you where Ancestry.com obtained those records. So in this case, we actually went to the Tribunale in Como and we digitized from original records. And so that's where we obtained these records. Then it gives you a database description. So there's oftentimes clues and hints and helps, both about why the records exist, why they were created, what you're going to find in them, what some of the things mean that you're looking at. We also will give you sometimes tips and tricks, like in this case, about how to actually read that record. And then again, what information's listed, what information we indexed. In the case of the Italian records in particular, all the births, marriages, and deaths are all in the same database for each location. And so we give you some information about what's included or what was indexed for each type of record. And so you can see that and decide for yourself what it is that you're looking at and what you can do next. We also then, in this case, and actually in the case of most of the Italian databases in particular, provide you with a list of the types of records that exist and for the different towns in that region. And so if you're familiar with Italian research, you know that that is a big help. And then sometimes we will have additional links, in this case at the very bottom of that database description, for more helps for doing research specific to that language. You'll see we've already created some of those word lists for you. We've created some, I love this one, it's last name meanings. So a lot of times when people immigrated to the United States, somebody whose last name may have been Blanco became white when they moved to the United States, because rather than just shortening their name or keeping their original surname, they translated that name into English. And so that helps as well. We also provide you with examples so that you can learn better how to read some of those other languages, because even though many of them use the Roman alphabet, sometimes they write some of their letters a little bit differently, and so there's some helps for that. And then, of course, we provide you with information about where to go to get more records for that country than what we have available online. So that is the Research Center for foreign languages. All of that is available in the Learning Center, but you will find the links to that most often in these database descriptions when you find a database that you are interested in. Okay, so one more time, we found those based on place pages. Place pages, you just click on Search All Records, you scroll down past the search box to the map, you click on the region of the world that you are interested in, and then you click on the country or state, province, territory that comes up on the map, and it will show you all of the records that we have in our international or our World Explorer collection for that location. Okay, so that's the first way that you can search those. The second way, and it's kind of, it's just another way into these records, is our card catalog. Those of you who've heard me speak before know that the card catalog is one of my favorite resources, and unfortunately I think it's one of the most underused resources. You're going to find the card catalog by hovering over the search button, and it will be the very bottom option, and then you can filter by location. Let's take a look at how that works. So I'm going to hover over search. Card catalog is this very bottom option here. You're going to see that Ancestry.com has over 30,000 databases on our website, but that's every database. You'll notice some of these databases have billions or hundreds of millions or tens of millions of records. So that's every time you just do a general search, you're searching the world of records, okay? So what we want to do is get really specific about which records we're searching. So over here on the left-hand side, we've provided for you filters, and one of those filters is to filter by location. So for example, I can say, you know what, I'm interested in what records Ancestry.com has for Germany. So I would click on Europe, then I would scroll down here and click on Germany, and what it does is it just, every time I make a click, it filters that list of 30,000 databases. Now I'm down to 1,694 databases. It sorts these by popularity. You can sort these however way you would like, alphabetically, in reverse chronological order based on when they were updated, based on the size of the database. I tend to use the alphabetical sort more often than not, just because that's the way my brain tends to work. And if you want to get even more detailed or more filtered from there, you can filter by location. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing that right off the bat, okay? I would recommend using a couple of these other filters first before you filter more by location, because you don't want to miss anything that might cover multiple areas or the whole country that might include that region. So I would actually filter maybe by record type. So maybe I'm interested in what vital records exist. And now I'm down to just 27 databases, right? So 27 databases of birth, marriage, and death records for the country of Germany. And maybe if I wanted to get even more specific, if that list was larger, or if I wanted to see even more specifically, I could come down here and I could say, you know what, really I'm just interested in records from the 1700s out of Germany. And now I've gone from 1,694 German databases down to 8. Those 8 very specific databases that will almost always list here the place or the location where those records are from, and then the record type, and then of course that year range for when I'm looking for those records. So click on that. You will notice, like in this example, there is no search box. So Ancestry.com actually has quite a few databases where we've completed the imaging, but the indexing hasn't been done yet. So 1940 is not the only database like that, right? We have cameras all over the world, and we're imaging records or creating digital images of records at a really fast pace. But the indexing of those records sometimes presents some really unique challenges. It's the more difficult part of the digitization process, and certainly the more costly and the more time-consuming part of that process. But we want you still to have access to these records. And so we've put these databases online and then provided you with this browse feature. Again, and if you've been with us through this 1940 census launch, you know how this works, but you just have to then know what area you are interested in and what time period you are interested in, and then it will take you to a set of records, much like the old days of genealogy research. I say that, and that's funny, but you know, I was just doing microfilm research on Saturday up at the Family History Library. So there are still millions and billions of records that are in microfilm form, and that's kind of like what this is. The images are here, but there's not a searchable index, and so you just have to go image by image through these records looking for what it is that you're looking for. One of the things that I do is I always pay attention to this front matter, is what we call it. That's a real technical term, so that I know what these records are that I'm looking at, so that I understand how and why and when they were microfilmed. I'll take some of these things, some of these words that I don't know or understand, and again, I'll plug them into that Google Translate so that I get a translation, so that I know what this information says and means. And then sometimes if I can determine how these records are organized, in this case they're time-based, and I know that this is 1809 to 1814, I'm looking for a record in 1812, I don't have to go image by image through all 337. I can jump directly to image 250 or image 300, see where I'm at. You know, here I'm in 1813 already, and then start going image by image. So lots of really great records online, but not all of them are indexed, so they would never surface in a search. But when you use this card catalog to discover what exists for your country and your time period and the place where your ancestors lived, you're going to find some real treasures in there, absolutely. I've actually located family in Germany doing that kind of research. So that's the card catalog. The third thing I'm going to suggest, and this is more of a search tip, but it's something that as I watch some of you do your research, when I go traveling and speaking and visiting at conferences, I'll sit or stand with some of you at some of these computers and watch how you do it. And one of the things that I see gets underutilized is what we call our collection filter. Some of you don't even know that it exists, and I'll show you how to find that. Some of you don't understand exactly how it works, and so I'll explain that so that you understand. So my question is, how many of you have ever been doing research and you know that your person was born in Virginia in 1812 and they died in Ohio in 1874, and you put that information into the search and the search brings up records from England? And so one of the reasons that happens is because when you do a search, we give each piece of information a score, as it were. And so if somebody who has the exact same name, first and last, and was born and died in the exact same years, but was living in England, they might come up higher on the list than somebody whose name was spelled a little bit differently and who the year was off just a smidge, but was in the location that you were interested in. So each piece of information has its own weight, and that's how we present that data, is based on what matched the closest. So if you want to control those search results a little bit more, we have given you that ability, and I just want to make sure you know how to use that. So if your search box looks like this, right? Let me actually go over to the search page. You might be able to see it a little bit better. If your search box looks like this, you're missing out on most of the control that's available to you to control your searches. So I would recommend that you're always using the advanced search box. It should look like this. Right? You should have this little checkbox up here about matching terms. Every field should have its own little filter, okay? But what we're looking for specifically in this case is right above the search button down here at the bottom. There's this little box called collection priority. So if you're doing research in the United States, for example, and that's obviously what I've been doing, you can select the United States, and then you can check this box here that says show only records from these collections. That means no matter what I put up here, even if I put in Scotland and England, I will only get results from the United States, okay? So if I'm looking for an immigrant ancestor from Scotland who came to the US and I want to find him in the US before I find him in Scotland, I could do that. Now if I'm ready to hop the pond, I can then switch this to UK and Irish, make sure again that that little box is checked, and do my search now for records in Scotland. This field right here and this checkbox are what we call sticky, which means once you set it, if you're using a personal computer, not at a library or something, once you set it, it stays the way it is. So if you've been searching in Germany, and then you decide to start searching for US records, make sure you switch it or you're going to get very frustrated because you're not going to get the search results you're expecting. But this is a really great way to control some of those searches into, just Canadian records, or just Italian records, or just, just UK records specifically, so that those are the only search results that you get are for those countries or for those databases that contain records from those countries. Hopefully that makes sense. I will be available on chat immediately following this presentation if you're watching it live. So if you have any questions about that or you didn't quite understand, please ask. If you are watching this via an archived version on YouTube, you can email at ask@ancestry.com about this presentation, or if you have other research questions and challenges that you think would make a good topic to be discussed in a future live stream broadcast. So please feel free to stick around and chat if you're watching this live, or email me if you are watching this as an archived version. You can also check our Facebook page for events to see topics, dates, and times for future live stream presentations. And I just want to remind you right now, we have a Mother's Day promotion going on where you can share your what your mother passed down to you and be entered to win some really great fun prizes and goodies. We're giving away prizes every week from now until Mother's Day, and you can find that on our Facebook page as well. Hope you'll join us over there or join me on chat following this presentation presentation. Hope this was helpful for those of you who are considering upgrading to a World Explorer subscription, or for those of you who have one, and hope that you are getting the most out of it. This is Crista Cowan. Until next time, have fun climbing your family tree.